Welcome to the acclaimed podcast, The Deep Dive, featuring your esteemed hosts, Andy Monitor and Drew Dinzik, powered by BetSperts.
Welcome to The Deep Dive. Andy, we are live in Las Vegas. We are signing up for contests this weekend. We are meeting up with a lot of our friends here in Las Vegas. It is going to be a great weekend. I could not be more excited. And we are joined by a guest, the great Jeff Benson of Circa Sports. Jeff, first ever appearance in The Deep Dive. Thank you for being so hospitable. You and Circa have done an amazing job so far making us feel at home here in the Circa Sportsbook. How is the contest cycle going for you so far?
It's good. Certainly a long way to go to get to 12 million. Obviously, that's kind of what Derek's been pushing. Obviously, we guaranteed 6 million in the Circa Million, 6 million in Survivor. Last I looked, we just broke $1 million in the Circa Million. We're about at 1,400 entries in the Survivor right now, so about 2.5 million in entries. But typically, what you see, obviously, as we start our first contest weekend is, 65 to 75% of the entries will come over the last, 2 to 3 weeks. So we're certainly hopeful we get, close to our 6 million guarantees in each. But if not, your listeners and anybody on gambling Twitter is certainly going to have, some plus EV, given that these contests are no rake, meaning that 100% of payback goes back to players.
I like it. Can you describe what people mean when they describe a contest as having an overlay? I think a lot of people are curious about what the heck is an overlay.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, we guaranteed 6 million in each contest. What that means is for Survivor, let's just say we get 4 million entries. Derek would basically be putting the other 2 million into the prize pool out of his own pocket, and then the players would obviously be competing against 2,000 less entries, which would certainly make each entry more profitable than what it is when they start.
Yeah, it was like how I was joking around about Max entering the underdog thing last night. The overlay didn't end up happening. The hooker filled up, and my golfers are not doing good. But that was my question: was going to be where's that money coming from? Sounds directly out of Derek. Derek just can't bet as much on Michigan State this fall.
Correct. It'll cut into his betting budget, but yeah, like I said. Last year we had about a $1.92 million overlay in Survivor, and obviously we also paid out the $1 million bonus on top of that. So basically last year we paid out $2.92 million in extra contest fees. And given where we're at right now, I'd certainly anticipate that we may have an overlay in one, if not both contests.
Okay, more likely to have an overlay in one or the other?
Yeah, I would say given that you can do 3 entries max in the Circa Million versus 6 entries max in Survivor, and then obviously you have the rebuy component if you take a team on Thursday night in the Bills-Rams game, which is on September 8th, which is the opening football game. I would say that there's way more of a chance to be an overlay on the Circa Million than versus Circa Survivor.
2 key questions, though.
You could buy 6,000 in entries.
Correct.
Take the Rams across the board.
Correct.
Bills win by 100, and then you could buy 6 more?
Correct. You can go into Saturday's deadline on September 10th with 6 total entries. So if you want to come in and you want to take 3 entries on each team and guarantee that you have 3 entries moving into that first NFL Sunday, you could do that and then come back and buy 3 more entries to get you to that 6 number.
Okay.
Or if you alluded to, you want to take 6 on one team, you can do that as well.
2 key questions. I'm going to come to the second one first, but you mentioned it. The Monday night, the Thursday night football game is Bills-Rams, which is not the same situation as last year where you had a Thursday night football game where the favorite was 8-point favorite, right? So it's not obvious to me who's doing that or why. But what is sort of the general idea behind capturing more plus EV by max entering? Why would the sharpest players out there be inclined to do that?
Yeah, I think that, when you have 6 entries at your disposal, you have more options, whether that's the double option, whether that's looking at obviously it's a traditional Survivor contest, but when you think about the added weeks of Thanksgiving and Christmas, there's a lot of people who will max enter in the Survivor contest just to get to Thanksgiving or Christmas, and then they have all these different options. Do they want to take 2 different teams on those days? Do they want to take, opposing teams in the same matchup on those days? I think when you look at max entering, it just gives you more optionality in terms of what you want to do. And then specifically when you get to those special holiday weeks, when you have to make 2 picks, one on that Thanksgiving day, obviously one on the Sunday, one on Christmas, one on the Sunday. It gives you just a number of different options to play with versus if you only have 1 or 2 entries.
And that wasn't something from the beginning of the contest. The Thanksgiving and Christmas?
Yes, so this is the 3rd year of Survivor. Year 1 and year 2, we had the Thanksgiving elements. Last year, we added the Christmas element. And then this year, really kind of the 2 biggest changes is obviously that Thursday rebuy component with the Bills-Rams. And then, I proposed a kind of an interesting wrinkle for Derek, and he really loved it. So this year, the bonus prize, which is $1 million out of Derek's pocket, is you cannot use either the Bengals or the Rams. You'd have to go the whole year, and you can't use one of the last year's Super Bowl teams. So obviously, it's a strong incentive for that extra $1 million. But given that you already have 20 picks to make, that leaves you with really only 30 teams to choose from. If you don't want to go with that, that Bills or that Rams or Bengals angle like I talked about. And obviously, when you look at, opening night, you would think most people would be leaning to the Bills, given that they're going to be the small favorite. And some people may not necessarily want to burn the Rams so that they're still eligible for that bonus.
You can't burn the Bills either, though. They're going to be They're going to be 6. They're going to be touchdown favorites.
There's a bunch of there's a Thanksgiving game, and just if you didn't use them there's other spots where they're going to be double-digit favorites. And truthfully, too, today we get the first moment that we got to thinking about this was our Uber driver talking about it. Legitimately, when we were going to the Circa from the airport, he brought up, "Oh, you get to play the Survivor thing?" He's like, "I play in this one," and he said, "He's like, the third one's hard." He's like, "Because it has Thanksgiving." He was poo-pooing, and he's like, "Yeah, that's too hard. I can't win that." But he did, and I thought this was I posited. I said, I think it's helpful because it's just such a big contest. Like, you don't want to see 30 guys chop at the end. Like, it does help you get that one guy holding the chop.
That's a fantastic point. And for listeners who haven't followed along, when you look at year 1, we guaranteed $1.5 million in Survivor. We guaranteed $1 million in Survivor. But at the end of the year, we had 35 entries who split. 35 people went 18-0. They each got roughly $68,000. And when you look at last year, you had 5 people who went 20-0, 3 people who were eligible for the bonus. So each of those 5 participants, walked away with 7 figures. You had 2 players who won $1 million, and then you had 3 people who won, you had 2 people who won $1.2 million, and you had 3 people who won $1.5 million. So certainly some really life-changing money. And obviously, to Andy's point, you don't want to have 100, 200 people chopping this contest. But when you have $6 million guaranteed, there's certainly a lot of opportunity for a number of different players to get to the end. But 20 weeks definitely makes it a lot harder.
I can tell you that the other thing that makes it important to have these wrinkles, the NFL has never been more bifurcated in terms of the haves and the have-nots. They strive for parity.
Bifurcated.
They have
one beer in you.
They have strive for parity in the NFL forever, but we have a clear break where there is a whole cluster of teams with like a -3 to -6 power rating, and then nothing until you're at neutral, and then everybody else that's kind of 20 teams above 0.
That's what made this damn Survivor pool tricky. Last year, come Thanksgiving,
sure.
I mean, what was the biggest spread at Thanksgiving last year?
Oh, it's 2-3 points.
Yeah,
right?
they were all really close games. I remember saying that I'm glad I'm out.
But I think you make a great point, because I think when you looked at the first 6 or 7 weeks of last year, you didn't have an upset that was more than a touchdown. And then obviously you had some catastrophic weeks.
Yeah. Then the Jets beat the Bengals.
Correct.
Yes,
well,
the Jets beat the Bengals.
Basically, everybody was just complaining on Twitter about Survivor. Like, oh, like 98% of my Survivor leagues made it through again this week and whatever they were at. Like, they didn't have that. Whereas, like, 2 years ago, and I distinctly remember this because I went balls deep on this team, was right off the bat, the Jags beat the Colts as like 10-point dogs.
25% of the pool was eliminated after that.
Oh, man.
And then when you look at Thanksgiving week, obviously last year, I think, everybody was basically saving, Dallas.
Okay.
And obviously, once you had, one massive upset, that took a ton of people away for Thanksgiving. So I think there's a huge game theory component when you look at the Thanksgiving and Christmas weeks, and ultimately, what people are saving for these weeks.
Now you don't have to do this, but I'm going to ask you if you can expose some of the sharp players what their game theory is. If you have 6 entries in Survivor or 3 entries in Circa Millions, do you see the sharper players tend to pick this, like, stay in the same stream and try to wait until the very end to differentiate?
Yeah, I mean,
try to capitalize?
it's hard to look at it during the season because of how many entries, but like when you get to the end, do you ever look back at like, all right, we got 8 guys left,
how long do you wait
at what they did?
How long do you wait before you differentiate? And what goes into that?
Yeah, I would say you see the sharper players, particularly those who max enter in Circa Survivor. They pick the same thing on all 6 entries, and the hope is to get as deep as possible into the season and then have that optionality that I talked about. Obviously, when you look at Circa Million, Hannibal Barca last year, he had multiple entries. And when you got to the end of the season for his entries, basically in week 18, he ended up picking the same thing on both of his entries, and he did not have a good last week.
I remember this.
And that caused him to fall out of first place. Where you looked at Derbify, who ultimately was the champion in the end, he had multiple entries, just like Hannibal Barca. On one entry, he chose 5 things, and on the other entry, he chose the exact opposite. And him having a week where he didn't go 2 and 3, 3 and 2, where he had that variance, more towards the 5 and 0, 0 and 5. That ultimately caused one of his entries to go to first place, the other to go to 10th place. But ultimately, by making that decision...
The upside with first is
correct.
For sure.
Yeah, you get a blazer.
Correct. So I think he obviously
Everybody obviously wants the blazer.
I think obviously he made a fantastic decision, but I think when you look at it, people who have those multiple entries, once they get into those positions, if they make the right choices, it's the difference between ultimately winning and losing.
Okay. Are there other wrinkles that you kind of notice as you get to the end of these contests where people are like, using Circa independently to try to hedge out of positions where they've captured equity by making deep runs?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you look at Survivor last year, we had a number of different people come in and make 6-figure bets, both on the spread and money line, on the opposition of what they chose in the Survivor contest. Having that liquidity and that out to be able to get down 6 figures, sometimes on credit, and really be able to hedge out of your position and certainly capture something for your deep season run was definitely something we saw. And then kind of another interesting wrinkle was obviously the tie component in Survivor.
Sure.
Because if you have a tie, which we definitely had a few of those last year, if a participant has a game in which they select a team and the game ties, both teams would be eliminated. So, ultimately towards the end of last year, probably in the last month or so, Chris Bennett, who's our director of risk, he would put up, will this game go to a tie? We definitely had people come in, kind of back wheeling their entry, making sure that the game didn't go to a tie. So that was certainly something interesting to see. But like you mentioned, having that ability to hedge out and lock in some profit is definitely something we saw towards the end of the contest.
And I mean, Circa, I'm guessing he put a 2-way out on that. If you want to bet,
absolutely.
If you want to bet, no, this does not tie. If you want to lay all your money for,
it's funny you mentioned that because when you look at the last game of the regular season last year between the Raiders and the Chargers, we got as low as probably 12-1 on the yes for there to be a tie. There was definitely people who were coming back and laying whatever we had on the no price at the time, given that the true odds were exponentially higher.
Were they?
Drew and I went back.
I don't know about that.
What were you starting? Like, what's a? I guess I'm not even sure the difference between a 3-point and a 7-point spread is that much of a differentiator between a game actually ending in a tie. But what were you opening tie at? 25-30?
On that specific game, yeah, I believe we probably opened 30-1, and it got bet down all the way to I think 12-1 at some point.
Do you remember the moment itself? And did Brandon Staley save you guys by calling that timeout?
He did. We took a bet we didn't want to. The Jaguars on the money line parlay to the tie, which was obviously correlated. So we certainly had quite the sweat, and it ended up working out for us. But yeah, like when you look at a random week, depending upon what the spread is, obviously you're going to have the tie odds be somewhere between 100-1 and 150-1. But obviously there was a much different scenario in that specific game, and obviously you saw what the market.
And then when I remember, we went back and forth, and I said, like, man, it's hard to say, like, we're okay with the tie. Let's have a game plan around that. So I didn't feel like it was as likely as people thought. Sure. And then it went to overtime, and I'm like, damn it, this is going to happen, because once you get to overtime at that point.
And if they didn't call that timeout, there's a very large chance that it ends up kneeling on the ball.
That was my argument, was you play to win that game, but if it ends up in overtime, then your whole mind shift. Switches. Then it's like, all right, we are 100%. Let's just bury them deep and get this tie, and that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the difference between playing the Chiefs versus playing the Bengals, I think that was something that certainly weighed into both teams' minds. But to your guys' point, once you got into overtime, I think there was a lot of game theory about what the opposition was doing. And, it was certainly interesting to play.
We might go 100 years and not see a game like that.
That was one of the wildest things you'll ever see, I think, in the sports gambling landscape. And the amount of correlated parlays and bets, just industry-wide across all these different operators.
We don't need to talk about it anymore. I want to ask you a little bit more about game theory revolving around the contest. I think it's pretty well understood, and we don't really need to go too into the weeds when it comes to making your survivor choice, where it's not just about figuring out who is the most likely to win on a given week. That's pretty easy. You have money line probabilities, like sharp books. Yeah, that's not. There's nothing special about that. There's also nothing special about looking at this, balance of the season and trying to determine who will likely be the most likely to win every given week, and making sure you have at least one team picked out for the whole season. There is absolutely a component in Survivor that comes down to, well, what is the pool? And trying to capture EV based on being a little bit differentiated from the pool broadly because of the potential for upsets. And there's there's a lot of ways to do that. They're commonly kind of pushed out there. We don't need to go there. But is there a sort of a similar theory that you think applies to the Circa Millions, where if you can be differentiated from the consensus, on top of having an edge on a certain number of games, that you can that is sort of the key strategy that needs to be employed across your picks?
Yeah, I think, obviously Andy does a lot of one and dones, and obviously there's a huge DFS component to it as well. I think when you just look at these contests and you say, I'm picking that team because I think they're going to win, I think you're doing a disservice to yourself, because I think, from a game theory perspective, you have to factor in what the ownership is of each survivor pick, or obviously what you think the consensus picks are going to be. And obviously, if your goal every week is just to take the biggest favorite, you have to look at the size of the pool you're playing in.
Yeah,
and,
sure.
You're not playing in a pool with 60 people. You're playing in a pool with 6,000 people. And I think there is some advantage to being contrarian at times. Referencing the Circa Million specifically, we come out with lines on Thursday at 10 a.m. Obviously, there's information that's released, whether it's Thursday, Friday for injuries. Obviously, maybe, hopefully, fingers crossed this year, less so with COVID. But there's going to be a lot of people who are just chasing these moves based on, the line being static in the Circa contest. And I think you're going to see a lot of people doing that. So it's not necessarily going against the move, but maybe finding games that aren't on that consensus list, that maybe, other people aren't necessarily playing, not necessarily picking against the moves, but picking games that you think, can give you a leg up while also not chasing the steam and trying to differentiate yourself, I think are certainly things that somebody can do that will give them a little bit of an edge.
Yeah, that's something that comes into play a little with like golf one and done, where it's like, hey, everybody, every year you have these guys that come up and young players like, hey, this guy wasn't on the radar in January as being a player that would be used. Suddenly somebody like Davis Riley, Cam Young, it's like, these are guys you can use. Yeah. And then you realize, like, well, yeah, but everybody has him. Yeah. Like, nobody used Davis Riley yet because he is just an up-and-comer. And you end up like, well, do we want to tread water with everybody at this? You get to the John Deere or something with a bad field, and you end up like everybody's going to use the same guy. We got to decide, you just want to ride the wave this week and cash what everyone else cashes? Or do you want to try to gain somebody here? And sometimes it depends on where you are. Like if you're way behind, and granted, you guys have what are there quarterly prizes and stuff?
Yeah,
too?
you hit the nail on the head. It all factors in. Your strategy all factors into where you are in the contest. If you start the contest and you're lagging behind and you have no chance to win, a quarter, you have no chance to be in the season-long top 100. Switch your strategy. Go for some of those booby prizes. Do some things differently. If you're at the top, and you're in the top 100 and you're fighting for a season-long prize, it wouldn't make sense to go against a lot of these moves. But if you're behind the pack and you're trying to gain a lot of that ground, or you're trying to come from behind in a one-and-done golf thing, you have to adjust your strategy. And at that point, figuring out if it's advantageous for you to go against some of those moves. To your point, that's where some of the sharper players in this contest are really going to differentiate.
Okay. Are there any side prizes in Survivor, or is just the quarterly stuff in the million?
So Survivor's just obviously going to be for the season long. In the millions, there's a number of different components. Yeah. You have quarterly prizes, 1 through 5, and then you have a booby prize, which is last place in each quarter, presuming you submit all your picks. And then when you look at the season-long prizes, you're going to have 1 through 100, and you're going to have a booby prize for last place, which is $100,000, and you're going to have a second-to-last booby prize, which is $50,000. So a number of different angles and ways to attack based on how things go.
If you really shit the bed for 2 weeks, at that point you're not getting in the you go 1-9 2 weeks in. You're probably not going to turn that around and get in the top 100. But you were in a damn nice spot for the quarterly booby prize. Yeah. Like you gotta, and to be fair, if you're doing that bad, maybe fading your own picks isn't good. Maybe just keep playing.
I mean, Derek said it time and time again. It's just as hard to pick winners as it is to pick losers.
Well, not necessarily, because there's a stale line. Yeah, there's a stale line component to where you're betting a bad number.
Reverse stale line. Yeah, and bad CLV.
We're not breaking ground here. People are obviously doing this, right? The guys who are going for the booby prize are trying to corner the stale line. Now, speaking of stale lines, if you don't know what we're talking about, it is a long-standing tradition for people to point to how their contest record went and be like, hey, I hit 58%. 58%. I'm an NFL genius. I'm a guru. Well, there's a decent chance that a good proportion of that you were betting against the stale line. And in general, in a contest, I think you have to be somewhat careful about taking the stale line because those are on everybody's card. So you're not gaining on the field if you're getting that free winner. You're just
probably to the quarter prize stuff too. Let's say you start 9-1. There's a decent chance that you want to be doing some things different in those next couple weeks to maximize your chances for that quarter prize. Where it's like, hey, I'm going to take a high risk, high reward thing here. I might fuck up my chances for the big one, but I'm in such a good spot here to differentiate myself over the next couple weeks, get this big ass quarter prize, and I mean any prize you could win in these is solid. There's a lot of entries that ain't winning.
I got to ask an important question though about the stale lines. There are other contests out there where the stale lines are a little more prevalent. I feel like a lot of the times I see the 10 a.m. stuff come out on Thursday from Circa, and I'm like, God damn it, they shaded X, Y, and Z.
And they're not as stale.
No, but like there is some stuff that's shaded a half point because you have to hang non-juiced. Yeah, there's no juice.
Correct.
You have to hang
indexing.
Yep, there's no
South Point rules.
Yeah, you have to hang. You have to hang half points, and sometimes they're shaded in a direction where I feel like you guys are somewhat anticipating where the market is going. Am I dreaming, or is that actually some thought that goes into that?
No, you're correct. I think when you look at this contest, obviously you have to put the line out at a certain time, and it's going to be static at some point.
Yeah.
So, for us, obviously, we're just trying to be as close to directionally, right as possible. Chris Bennett, who's our director of risk, he manages, primarily, our baseball and NFL markets. I think he does a fantastic job of obviously, shading things a half point here, half point there, and kind of putting his spin on where he ultimately thinks the line's going to close. That way the players have as close to a true line as possible.
Okay, so it's fair to say the contest lines from Circa represent Chris Bennett's guess as to the closing.
That's a correct assumption.
And it's funny, too, because the more I'm thinking about this, there's no benefit to making those any better. Like,
Yeah, no, there is.
No, you do, but at the end of the contest, like, if pick a preseason game tonight. Whoever's the Browns.
Browns. Yeah.
You set the Browns at minus 18. You're probably going to get swamped tonight. But if you do that contest line, it doesn't matter. You're going to pay out the same at the end. I get that you want to be good. You want to be close, but
players want.
They do want that. That's what I want to hear you say.
As close to what the closing line is going to be. The more lines that move off of what the number is, the less good it is for the people in the contest, because you're just going to have X amount of players who just blindly take that line.
Yes.
And I think that's one of the biggest leaks in a lot of people's games. They just play way too safe.
Yeah.
They just chase these line moves, and it ultimately doesn't provide them any advantage.
They hit like 61% and finish 300. Don't make a dime.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah.
No, and that's what I want to hear you say. It's like, it is, if you have a bunch of stale lines, it makes the content, it doesn't change a damn thing on your end. Like on your end, you're just ending up with, you pay out the same amount at the end. It doesn't change anything financially, but it does make it a better contest. Like,
Totally.
Yeah, it's better for the players, for sure.
Absolutely.
All right, so I agree with this. Conceptually and in general, like, I noticed that it's good to hear that that's somewhat built into the side process. I want to talk a little bit more about the process of building lines and get away from the contest, even though that's
it got me thinking.
Mostly
like all this quarter. Now I feel like I'm a quarter prize guy now, because it got me thinking about the baseball one that I flamed out of thanks to I can't remember who the team I had higher power rated than the market that did not work out, but there was a baseball survivor contest that they run, and it's weekly. So, and then I looked at it and said, I don't really know baseball that well. And then I looked at it and it said, your team has to finish 500 or better. And I thought about that. I'm like, well, if you have an even number of games, that's more important than anything else. By like a considerable mark, like going 3-3 compared to 4-3. There's a considerable margin there. I'm just going to break down the schedule and power rate. Where do I have even number of games with good teams? And like I've never cashed, but I've gotten deep in that one. Just not even really understanding baseball. So, I mean, it's fun. The game theory when you find something like that. That's where I think I'm a quarter prize guy now.
Yeah. Is there any kind of hidden edge still in these contests for the millions, putting in Thursday Night Football pick?
I would say that most people do not put in a Thursday night pick just because the information that you're going to get, Friday when they release injury report, and sometimes early Saturday morning is just way too advantageous. So typically it's usually the most least selected game of the week, and I would anticipate that trend to continue.
Have you ever thought about changing that?
Right.
Letting someone do the one and then do the other 4 later on Saturday.
It's just totally a software. It's totally a
Yeah.
software thing. If we had the software to do so, we would allow people to do 1 and 4.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's a software thing where you have to submit all 5 picks at once.
Makes sense.
I know. I've always thought about that. It'd be more fun if you could.
That's one of the
It would
biggest
make the
complaints.
Thursday things. It would make that a lot more interesting for that.
Well,
Such is life.
Yeah. I mean, it's a small thing. And it's still a very fun contest, frankly. And I in general, if you have a consensus play that's based on some information coming available between the opening lines and the stale line, effectively, nothing peeves me more than when that actually comes through and 90% of the pool gets a free win, and you're like, man, that could have been a big differentiating factor. So. whatever the case. When you guys are your traders are setting up sort of their weekly lines for any given week in the NFL, we've talked a lot about market cycle. When do you get down? How do you anticipate line moves? Do you get when you are anticipating a line move in the direction where you have an edge, making sure you beat the market to that move is important. How do your traders kind of go through that market cycle? When are they the most keen on bets coming in? And how does sort of the raising of limits, how does that work for you guys in terms of sort of that dance between the bettor and the bookmaker?
Yeah, I think it's a great point. Obviously, when you open numbers, your limits are going to be lower than right before post. So for us, obviously, when we're opening NFL, we may open NFL, right when the Sunday Night Football game starts. We may open the sides at a $5,000 limit. And then obviously when you look at what we're going to take at post, on the app with zero approval process or at the counter, that's going to be $100,000 come Sunday. So obviously there's a pretty big spread between, the $5,000 openers and $100,000 at post. Obviously we're very keen when we open numbers, because you're certainly going to see a lot of people. That's going to be the time when the market is the least efficient. So you're certainly going to be people, weighing the ability to get down, X amount at that price without, kind of blowing up the market, versus, waiting until Sunday when they're able to get down, 20X higher, but the market is going to be much more efficient. So I would say for us, obviously it's a tiered limit system. As the week progresses, those limits are going to go up. And when those limits are going up, that's speaking to the comfortability factor of what we've seen up to this point with bets on both sides and where we're at with the specific numbers. So if we're writing good two-way or we're taking bets on a game and there's no injury concerns, we're probably going to be quicker to bump it than if it's a Browns game and we're unsure whether Deshaun Watson's going to play or not. So I think there's a lot of different things that go into it, whether it's an injury game or it's a game we feel very comfortable about given the bets we've taken on both sides. I would say that kind of is what goes into our limit progression process and how our traders kind of factor that information in.
And I mean, the limit progression, the fact that yours is generous as well. I mean, it's the silliest fucking thing that anyone has to say, but like, you guys, you have it's a lower vig. You have a nice over, especially in the future books. But you still charge a vig. That's the nature of the beast, and that's why it's so silly. Some of the sports books that don't, like, if you take more bets, you make more money. That's just how it's going to work long term. And that's what I see when I see. And granted, it's because it's new. It's nice because it's new, but it's also nice because it's nice. But the sports book and the Stadium Swim, it's like, hey, how else can we just get a shitload of volume on NFL? Let's make a really nice sports book, and then, like, guess what? I don't, even if it's a whole bunch of $100 bettors on Sunday, you can take a shitload of limit on the NFL. It's just going to be a good winter.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at sports betting, obviously you guys are, keen to what goes on in the market. Whether you're holding 3% like we are, or whether you're holding 10% like maybe a more recreational book. Both those things are low holds, and I think in any low hold business, you want to do everything to incentivize volume. And for us, we didn't apply for a license to not take bets. Our goal when somebody walks to the counter, whether it's you, my dad, Billy Walters, whatever it may be, our goal is to take as big a bet as we can humanly take. And like Andy mentioned, we strongly believe the more volume we take, whether it's from a recreational and non-recreational client, that it's going to be more profitable for us over the long run.
Do you have certain players that like are refreshing, waiting for that limit, and then like the bet comes in like within,
That's a good question. Is it like limits up and then all of a sudden you take a bet like 10 seconds later?
Yeah, absolutely. I think people get attuned or accustomed to the consistency in terms of when we bump limits.
Sure.
At 6 a.m. on a Sunday, the limits may go to 100,000 on a side. Somebody, it may not be worth it for somebody to bet it at 50,000, but it's worth it for them to bet it at 100,000. Based on the liquidity they're trying to get down. So, obviously Spanky's talked a lot about it with his, his odds screen and stuff like that. I think people being able to understand, both what the line is and what the limit is, and what they're able to get down at a specific place goes a long way to people trading professionally.
That makes sense.
Oh, 100%. And it makes me think of the Dylan story from the draft, too. Like, I'm guessing the traders are a little more focused on the screen when limits go up, like right after, if you're about to take a couple of, hey, we might take some bets that we weren't going to take 20 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Let's pay attention, fellas.
If it's November and Matt Stafford is questionable with an elbow, and you go limits up and a bet comes in against the Rams, that's limits, a couple in a row, you're immediately like, oh, the jig is up. Stafford's not playing.
Yeah, I mean, the market is going to tell you where you're wrong on things. Obviously, you're going to see that, much more so in the draft, than what you'd see in the NFL. But I think when you look at any market, you look at the limits that we're taking. When you're trading in our room and you are booking a specific sport, I mean, Chris Bennett's talked about it ad nauseum. I mean, you have to be so plugged in and so glued to that bet ticker because of the limits that we take. When you're taking 100,000 on an NFL game and somebody goes down in warm-ups, or you're taking 2,000 on draft props, and some piece of information comes out, this stuff just gets steamed, into oblivion, and taking your eyes off the screen for 1 second, you could take 3, 4, 5 limit bets.
That was exactly what Dylan said when we had him on to talk about the draft 2 years ago, when you just made him open up 100 prop markets. He's like, I think at that point you were taking 1,000, but he's like, man, you get like 3 people on the window or the app that bet 1,000 on the same one in like a half hour. You kind of got to go back to your computer and start doing a little research and like hitting the Twitter and be like, oh shit, what happened? Like, did this guy do a workout or what happened? Did everybody suddenly hit the under? He's like, all these quarterback markets have just been getting thunder fought. Yeah. It was interesting. He's like, some of that info is really hard to find. He's like, but you take a bunch of bets on it and you have to go find it anyway.
There's got to be the other side of the coin though too, right? Where sometimes your guys and you internally you have a decent read on a certain injury situation. It's built into the number before you go surface pop, and then people still bet it when the injury report goes up, and you're like, yeah, it was built in. We're not moving. Is that some example?
Taking a position?
Absolutely. I think it's specific to each relative market, but there's things where we get the information first and we go to a number. We have guys who are just kind of cleaning the board, with what our number is versus, what other places have. And, I think having those kind of people, certainly serves its purpose and its benefit at times. When we go to a number that's maybe off market, and we have people who come in and fill those positions. And ultimately, those are bets that we can both earn to, and there's certainly bets that we're looking for at that time.
I got you. Okay, so here we are in the middle of August,
and if your line is better than the guy across the street, then you're happy with board cleaners because it's going to earn more often than theirs is.
Yeah. Before you touch on your point, that's one other thing that we not only like, but we encourage. We're all about volume. And if you want to lay 3 on a game and we go to 4 and you want to take that 4 instantly, you're more than welcome to do that. If we have 4 on the board, anybody is welcome to bet it, including somebody who just bet it beforehand. So, I think for us, like I said, it's all about incentivizing volume, driving that action. And I think when you look at a lot of other places, when you lay 3 and then they go to 4 and you take that 4, that's a big no-no in the industry, which for me, I've never really understood. If you want to go to 4, anybody should be able to bet that number. And like I said, people here having the ability to, lay 3, lay 4, lay 5, or bet it back at any time, and know that their account's not going to be closed or their limits are going to be chopped. I think it's a huge selling point for us.
What is the legality of that? I know there is some touchiness on that. If a number moves, you can bet the other side. You just can't come in and say, I want to bet $50,000 on both sides of this basketball game.
Yeah.
Because of the
because you're laundering money.
Yeah. Obviously, that's a little different, but I think when you look at a lot of these books.
No, and I'd heard that, but if the line moves, you're absolutely allowed to bet at the same book the other way if it's moved?
At Circa Sports, if you lay 3 on a game and we go to 4, you can lay 4.
Yep.
Or if you want to take back plus 4 and build a position however you want, you're more than welcome to do that. I took plus 3 early in the week a couple of years ago at a shop, and then I bought back at -1.5 after some COVID news, and my account was closed, and I was told never to do that again. So, like I said, to me, that's the antithesis of wanting to write bets and what a lot of places are trying to do. But here at Circa, people are more than welcome to do that.
If you don't want the bet, don't move the number there.
Correct. Exactly.
Okay, so you guys differentiate yourselves with the contest. We know that's a no-brainer. You differentiate yourselves with the kind of customer experience. That's a no-brainer. You also, from a price standpoint, try to corner the market from the futures whole and offer the best prices in the futures market. And here we are in the middle of August. Presumably, we're as sharp as we are going to be in terms of just raw opinion on these teams. Until we get more information and people get hurt, or we learn a little bit about certain players and their development through preseason games, there's not really going to be much that moves the futures markets. Am I on the right track?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's dependent upon the market, but when a lot of this stuff was released and opened up early in the summer, that was when the market was the most inefficient. That's when people really had the most opinions. You saw a lot of bets on the opening numbers. Obviously, that had a lot to do with free agency, a big deal to do with the draft and things like that. And now when we're working your way into training camps and then obviously preseason games, what happens in these preseason games, injuries and information, particularly, for preseason sides, totals, and money lines, that's what's really going to move the market. I think when you look at maybe the Super Bowl market, and the conference market, those markets are going to move less so now, given that they've had a lot of time to develop. But when you look at maybe an MVP market or an offensive rookie of the year market or a coach of the year market, a lot of that stuff's going to move maybe a little bit more hard, given a lot of that stuff is reflective of what happens in each preseason game and stuff like that. Obviously, we were talking before we came on. We took a bet on Bailey Zapp, the third stringer for New England. Obviously, he looked good in their first preseason game. A lot of stuff like that you're going to see where people are being kind of reflective of what's happening in these preseason games and trying to get ahead of some of that information.
Which I don't hate. Those are fun.
Do limits reflect that? Like, can you basically just go and look at the futures markets limits and see Super Bowl, conference futures, division futures prices where you can get down large size, and then in the player future markets it's a little more tight?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I think there's more of an efficiency at this point in the Super Bowl and conference markets than what you might see in some of the Rookie of the Year or MVP markets. But obviously for us, as these markets get more efficient, we're taking sizable bets. I think when you look at say somebody who's in the 9-1 to 12-1 range, a Kenny Pickett type, a Chris Olave type. Treylon Burks, who obviously didn't do much in his first game, and we dropped from 10-1 to 12-1. Those are guys you can get on the app for $3,000 with no approval process, which is a pretty fair bet in that Rookie of the Year market. And then obviously as you work your way down to guys like Isaiah Pacheco, who's really been the buzz of the Chiefs camp and stuff like that. He's 75-1 in our Rookie of the Year pool. He was probably 300-1, 10 days ago. He's somebody you can get $1,000.
What's fair price for Kenny Pickett?
Yeah, it's missing a zero.
It's obviously based on all the news up to this point in Steeler camp. It certainly looks like Mitch Trubisky is going to be the starter, and obviously without an injury or a terrible performance over the first couple of weeks from Mitch Trubisky, it doesn't look like Kenny Pickett has a huge path to playing this year. I'd probably make that number a little bit higher, but the good thing about what we do here at Circa, to your point,
you have to,
is we have two-way markets.
Yeah, right.
So we can't price gouge the customer.
Yeah, right.
If we take Kenny Pickett bet after Kenny Pickett bet after Kenny Pickett bet, we can't just artificially go to 5-1.
Yeah, right.
We have to be respectful to the fact that we have a no price, and if we get low enough, we may have a guy like you come in who's wants to short Kenny Pickett and is a non-believer. So I think having that two-way pricing really helps us to be honest with our future market and stick to our targeted hold. And like I said, if people don't believe in Kenny Pickett or aren't Steelers fans, they have the ability to come in and bet, X amount of dollars to win $3,000 on the no on Kenny Pickett.
Yeah, and $3,000 is.
Do you guys think
more? Yeah, I need to transfer. There's Bitcoin ATMs all over town.
Oh, really?
Well, if you want to pay 10%. But,
They take it for the hotel and stuff like that. Obviously, I'm a big Bitcoin fan. A lot of the people on our, in our risk room and on our management staff are Bitcoin fans. So hopefully, the Nevada Gaming Control Board will get on board one of these days and be able to.
That's what we're waiting for.
I mean, the legal market in general. Like that's what drives me nuts about when I do go to Iowa. And God bless you guys, you're down there. That's my next question is, we won't go on a Bitcoin tangent as we're getting a little low on time here, but this, your decisions to delve into Colorado, Iowa, now Illinois, is it all just going to be like, hey, these states have reasonable regulations because we have, a lower VIG and we don't want to go big overhead on anything here? Fucking Iowa, there's not a Circa counter in Iowa. No, you're not going to walk up to one. You go down there, you just cross the border and you park behind a grain elevator and you pull out your phone. I'm not saying I park next to a Casey's now. They have better Wi-Fi, but it's super low overhead. You just have to get the licensing. You have to get the app ready and just start taking deposits.
You hit the nail on the head. It's all about favorable rules and regulations. I think when you look at what we're doing in Colorado and then obviously what we're doing in Iowa, it's all about remote funding and remote registration. And conversely, when you
and then Illinois now with their getting back to remote.
Yeah, and then conversely, when you look at a state like New York, which has a 51% tax rate, that's unsustainable for a small operator like ourselves. Obviously, we hope to be in California where Drew's located, but that would seem to be prohibitive given the market access fee we'd have to pay and stuff like that. So it'll certainly be interesting, but it'd be nice if the rules and regulations on a state-by-state basis were a little bit more consistent, particularly for the smaller operator.
Okay, so here's the key question then. There are a lot of, or at least there was a piece published by ESPN this week that caught a lot of attention, shared in a lot of corners of gambling Twitter, that was basically positing that the future is player props. And if you want to grow volume, you got to cater to the 20-something who is maybe more into the, hey, I want to bet on this guy to hit this many yards. And micro betting, live betting, all that. Like, there is like a mindset, a growth mindset of that's where we should be going as an industry, or at least trying to capture those dollars. You guys are tacking hard in the other direction. Is that a fair statement? And then does this concern you? Or do you think that the people that are chasing those small fish are going to be, you'll be laughing at them as you're eating their lunch in 10 years?
Yeah, I would say it's an accurate statement. For us, we have more of a meat and potatoes type of menu, in which we, really cater to people looking to get down sizable limits, on main markets. I would say, over the coming years, we're working on our tech stack, and the hope is by working on our tech stack, continuing to grow our team. I mean, we've only been in operation, 3+ years, whereas a lot of these other places have been around for quite some time, have much bigger budgets than us, much bigger teams. So for us, like I said, we're working on, our tech stack, and we believe by growing our tech stack and our team, we'll be able to automate definitely some more things. And the hope is as we automate things, work with our debt prison partner in Colorado and things like that, that we'll be able to offer, definitely more player props and derivative markets than we have up to this point.
Is it realistic, though, to expect that maybe that this just breaks into bifurcates into two markets altogether? Where like what if in 5 years it's like Circa's competing with the exchange model that's out there, and
I think
everybody else is going
after the small stuff, competing with the DraftKings and the FanDuels and having the spend they have, and they'll just go into any state that lets them because they're able to cover that. Like I would agree, it's better to just slowly, like the meat and potatoes. Yeah, guess what? This menu, it's like going to, like Chili's. Like, it's 9 pages deep and it's all okay. Yeah. It's like, hey, guess what? Here, we have steaks. Yeah, we have potatoes, we have asparagus, but it's prime.
You don't walk into Fleming's and say, give me the blooming onion. You say, like, give me your best cut. But, like, I guess, you're never going to offer same game parlays. You're not really trying to court that customer, right?
Yeah, I would say for us, we're definitely trying to go after a different customer. Ultimately, we'd like to add more, recreational customers, and I think in the long run, as we add more props, we originate more markets, and we have better technology, we'll certainly have the ability to do that. Obviously, those who follow me on Twitter, they know how kind of outspoken I can be at times. And I would say the one kind of maybe, pushback I would have on, DraftKings and FanDuel and some of these places that, have a wide and deep prop menu is, I would say a lot of it is sports betting for decoration if you can't get down a fair and sizable bet. So, we could put all those props on our menu and take $25 to them too. That doesn't really fit our model and what we're trying to do. So I guess that would be some of my issue with what I see. But ultimately, like I said, when we do put player props and derivative markets on the board, our goal is to take a fair bet to them. And we will have definitely a more expansive list of player props this year. Obviously not as deep as a DraftKings or FanDuel or things like that. But continuing to grow and automate and hopefully add to our menu.
Same in the offshore space. Like you find a lot more fun stuff, but it's like, oh no, like somebody found I found a crazy good price on Ukraine to win Eurovision. I log in, I go there, I hit the max button, and it was $10. And I already had it. It was already in there. So fucking, I hit enter anyway. So I won. It was plus 120, so I won $12. Like, I paid for some chilies that night.
Do you guys see the future of exchanges onboarding in the U.S. as an actual competitor? And like, if you're looking over your shoulder, is that who you're most concerned about?
So that's happening like now.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how kind of the exchange type model, kind of unfolds. Obviously, I think what's been kind of maybe a pain point for a lot of these exchanges up to this point is really who's seeding that liquidity, and really who's market making for those.
So you guys are getting into market making for exchanges? Okay, interesting.
We talk about the Pinnacle model. Everybody knows the Pinnacle. Pinnacle is betting too, but I mean, we talked a little bit about that with Captain Jack as far as having the sport trade profit exchange, like the difference between self-seeding and customer acquisition for that stuff, because like selling this, we talk about the same game parlays and all the stuff that the 20-year-olds like, hey, guess what, minus 103. I don't give a shit. I don't have an account there though. I already have $300 deposited.
And that's really the difference between Nevada versus non-Nevada.
Yeah, sure.
The bettors really educated in Nevada, much like you guys, they are price sensitive.
Yep.
And they just expect something different, whereas people who haven't grown up in Nevada and haven't experienced that obviously are looking more towards the same game, parlays, and some of the the prop bets where they can get down.
But your core customer base, if they can get 5,000 down somewhere else before they can get it down, where here they're going to do it. Like it's piracy out there, man. There's no brand loyalty among the customers you guys are courting. And I guess I think realistically, is there a way to use the incoming wave of exchanges across the U.S. and weave it into making Circa more robust and more strong?
And that is the tougher part for you, because it's funny. Like, you probably put out the best product, and you're going to have the least brand loyalty because you're attracting the kind of customer who's like, well, Jeff hung it at minus 105, but it's minus 104 here. They have limits, and so, I mean, like I joked about with the recreational bettors, like they wouldn't switch if it was minus 125 and it was even money elsewhere if they had to go through the sign-up process. Like, I already have money at DraftKings. The pain they're willing to put up with for a horrible line is amazing compared to what your customers would do as far as jumping to another book.
Yeah, I would say my counterpoint to that would be when you have the best prices, people are going to find you, and you're ultimately going to get the volume. We encourage people to price shop, to have multiple apps. That's something that we're upfront and open about. But I think when you look at our future product, you look at our money line splits, and things like that, I think by having the best splits and having the lowest theoretical hold on futures, I think that's ultimately going to drive people here. So I would say, I'm not necessarily worried about that at the current moment. And if we continue to be competitive in terms of our pricing, that's really going to get people in the door.
If you guys had access to exchanges, either not in Nevada but somewhere else, would you feel like you have better risk management tools at your disposal and you could raise limits and take even bigger action?
I mean, I would say as the market matures and the market gets more efficient and the pricing becomes better, I think obviously we're aware of what's going on in the market and things like that. I would say, as that stuff kind of comes online, that could only help our pricing in terms of A, being better for the player and B, being more efficient.
Okay, I love that answer. All right, let's get you out of here with an easy question. Taking a lot of action in the futures market, in the low-hole futures market. I can tell you the answer to this because just watching the prices change. Who are we rooting against for the 2022 NFL campaign?
Or college too.
Or college, yeah. Who are we rooting against?
Nothing yet in college, but in terms of NFL,
just not enough teams.
And most of the college.
Well, it's just like, hey,
those are donkeys who are in town.
We would get crushed if Vanderbilt wins the title.
In terms of the NFL, I would say up to this point, our two worst results would be the Steelers winning the Super Bowl. We took some bets at long numbers before. With the thought that, they may get a better quarterback, which didn't ultimately pan out. So, we feel very comfortable with our position there. And then there's been a ton of interest on the Las Vegas Raiders, to no one's surprise. Obviously, the acquisition of Devontae Adams, and that trade certainly spurned a ton of bets there. So those would be our two worst results in the Super Bowl future market at this point.
Okay. Sell a lot of beers at the Stadium Swim if the Raiders are good.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
It's like the Golden Knights.
You just want AFC Championship loss.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
If they're competitive and they're good, it's certainly going to be good for the city and good for him.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the Knights thing was. How many people just put like $20 on them because I can finally bet on a local team?
Yeah.
And everybody sitting there with all this goddamn EV as they're sitting there at the end of the year.
That's great. Well, so broadly speaking, what constitutes success for Circa this year with an NFL? Like, are you looking to try to grow handle, get more, fill up these contests? Like, what constitutes success for everybody in the back room when you guys are celebrating at the end of the year?
I would say if we can get to at least 5,000 entries in each contest and not have more than a $2 million overlay, I think that would be a strong growth from a contest perspective. If we're able to get over the overlay and Survivor, which I think is a really strong possibility, I think that'd be considered a smashing success. And when you think about the NFL season and Circa Sports and our growth, I think if we're able to increase our handle, we're able to see growth in all three states, and we're ultimately able to come online with Illinois and add a fourth state to our portfolio. I think it'll be a really successful 2022 season.
Well, close with that, then. What do you know on Illinois? I know I got coworkers, teammates, friends. They're antsy. What's the...
Great question. We're just as antsy as them. The licensure process has been quite convoluted, to no one's surprise. We're hopeful it'll be early Q1 of next year.
Just before the NFL draft.
Yeah, just before the NFL draft. So the thought process would be, they're going to open in a temporary structure for a couple of months, and then hopefully we would get our license shortly thereafter. Like I said, the hope would be that we would be open at some point in January or February at this point.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome.
Okay, so a couple of closing comments from us. It was extremely easy to sign up for the contest, like laughably. The customer service was excellent.
And people have asked about proxy stuff. Like,
the proxies.
We took a picture with Maddie. He's just sitting down there for like 6 hours a day.
He'll be there. He's down there from 9 to 3
tomorrow too.
On weekend, Friday and Saturday at least. You can email him also and get set up to meet him anytime.
Or Tony.
And there's other proxies as well. But Maddie was out. He's outstanding. He's easy to enter your picks online. Send them up. Do it Saturday morning. I'm in multiple contests with different partners and groups of partners, groups of friends, and so if you're unwilling to get involved with a full $1,000 entry, splitting it amongst a handful of your buddies gives you an excuse to get on a text chain on Friday night and really hash out what your 5 picks are. And then your wife is like, "It's family time Friday. There's no football. Why are you on your fucking phone?" Like I don't.
At the high school game, figuring out if they take Bengals or not.
What is so important that you have been texting for 30 minutes? It's like, well, we can't choose between the Patriots and the Dolphins. It's been very, very hot.
That's right. I told the ones I bought into. I asked them, like, can I buy into these and not have an opinion?
Yeah, of course.
Like,
I just want. I'll take a share. I'll take a share.
Well, then I can blame them if I don't cash out this year. So.
Yeah, of course. Well, I didn't make the pick.
Yeah,
of course.
exactly. So,
Yeah,
Jeff, awesome. Appreciate
Thanks for having me on, gentlemen.
Yeah, it was
Appreciate
great.
you. Yep, we'll see you around this weekend, undoubtedly. Great job.
We'll be back
Great
next
job by
week with
you.
some NFL previews again. So, we'll catch you guys.
Hit the music.
We're going to go gamble.
Yeah, let's go gamble.
I gotta run.
Yeah,
We're taking it up your time. You guys went for a beer? You gotta go?
It's all good. My flight just got pushed back 2.5 hours.
Let's go grab there. Yeah.
hold on. Let me.
Well, I'll go get around while you wrap up.
We didn't even kill the stream.
Do you want to come and sit back here, or do you want to go sit?
We're still just live.
What's that?
We're still just live.
Oh, okay.
You guys were just talking, and I kind of